everybody. Welcome to Rachel's Reviews. This is our 11th episode of the Female Film Critics panel. I'm so excited to get to talk to very special film critics and professionals today. I'm really thrilled to have Grae Drake is here.
Hello.
Yes. And Kaitlyn Booth is here.
Hello.
Yes. Thank you so much, ladies, for coming on the podcast and talking with us. I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So what I like to do is give you both a chance to introduce yourself and tell us how you became a content creator and critic. And Grae, why don't you start?
I am a former filmmaker and a always movie nerd. And eventually, after starting my own podcast, I got hired to write movie reviews, which was both like my dream and my nightmare, because as a filmmaker, criticizing other filmmakers' work is very difficult for me emotionally. I started working with CNN to review movies. Then I was hired by Rotten Tomatoes. I created their video content department from scratch, and that now work with MoviePhone and just continue to like be opinionated in a public space. And it's really a blessing.
That is awesome. I know I've been watching you for a long time, so it's very surreal to have you here on my show. So thank you so much. And Kaitlyn, you are part of Utah Film Critics Association like I am.
Yeah, we
tell us
actually know
how
each other
you
IRL.
got your start.
I kind of accidentally,
Yeah, that's right.
I actually stumbled into film criticism rather by accident. I just started going to a lot of movies, especially Thursday night screenings, when they were doing a lot of midnight screenings, on the logic that people who are staying up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning are less likely to be jerks at that time. And I just started checking in on Facebook, and I would just, the paragraphs when people would ask me what think about the movies would get longer and longer and longer. And it was actually in the middle of a debate about Space Jesus and Prometheus with my parents' priest that he said to me, I know, really, that I should start my own blog. And I blogged independently for a little while, got picked up by a local content site here that's unfortunately no longer around, and I got picked up by Bleeding Cool in November of 2016. I've been there ever since.
Oh, wow.
Woo! I'm their EIC
really
now.
Great. Yeah, that's really cool. Wow. So what did you go to school in as far as or did you go to any kind of school before you became a critic?
I'm an English major. So
English major. Nice.
Yep, I have no formal training.
You talk real purdy.
I talk real purdy.
That's great. Well, great. The first time that I ever saw you was on What the Flick, the review of Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1. And you were talking about all the meaningful staring.
Oh, so much.
And I was wondering, what is that like when you give your feedback on a film with a fandom like that? I mean, I think that they probably, most of the Twilight fans have pretty thick skin at this point, probably. But I don't know, what was that like for you to be on something like that?
I love the What the Flick crew. I'm so excited that they are now doing Breakfast All Day. You can find that podcast. They're some of the greatest minds in cinema criticism working today, I think. And so I show up to give that review with these wonderful people. I did not thankfully get any flack. I got a lot of ha-has from the Twilight fans, because I think that deep down they knew that I was right, first of all, but also secondly, that my perspective of the movies is very important, that I really appreciate the fact that they are fans. Like Kevin Smith said it best, the year that Twilight showed up at Comic-Con and changed the game forever in San Diego by lining up overnight and like being so dedicated. Everybody wants to like trash those fans. And Kevin Smith said, listen, those fans are great because it got my daughter to read books. And this is a whole bunch of kids that are joining us in the fandom, and we should let them in. We don't need to be gatekeepers as to what's cool. We need to welcome these people. And so that's always like the deep down perspective that I've come from. I really like the actors that are involved in the movies. I give props where they're due, and so I never got any negative feedback from true fans. I hope because deep down they understood that that's where I was coming from, and I could be quoted saying similar things.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, Kaitlyn? About fandoms like the Twilight fandom, and when you've done reviews and things?
Well, I don't like to poke the bear. There's no fun in poking the bear. I've managed to go this long without getting a death threat. I would like to continue that streak. So fingers crossed.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, you have to. I think the biggest thing when it comes to criticizing something that has a very dedicated fandom is to not be mean-spirited about it. So, like, you can dislike something all you want, but you can't just. You have to at least show some compassion for the fans and that you understand why they like the thing, and just let people like what they want to like. It's fine. Like what you like. I don't care. Here's what I think about it. If you don't agree with me, then I'm not the critic you should be following. Follow somebody whom's their opinions line up with yours usually, but mine aren't. Then that's fine. And yeah, I think not being mean spirited about it is the best way to approach things with very strong fan bases.
So on Bleeding Cool, you cover a lot of the movie news, and you do as well on Rotten Tomatoes. And I'm curious, how do you think that affects your overall sort of coverage of the films? Like if you hear that something has had this rocky production, or maybe there's a couple involved, or just whatever the news is, do you find it hard to sort of separate that all and then just go and watch the movie and have an objective opinion? What do you think, Kaitlyn?
Well, first of all, I think pure objectivity is impossible. We all have some bias on some level. And being so in the thick of it, I actually think makes it even, in some ways, it almost makes me even more forgiving, because once you know the chaos that's going on, as Grae will tell you what the chaos behind it and the camera is like, you tend to understand that, reshoots happen. Like, that's the big thing that has become a big thing in these last couple of years, is people freaking out when reshoots happen, even when they're like 2 weeks of reshoots are happening. It's like, those are pickups. Those happen all the time. It's a thing. So I think understanding and gaining a better understanding of what the industry actually is makes a lot of those stories that get blown up into big deals, into being like big clickbaity headlines, they're actually not that big of a deal, and it's just part of the natural filmmaking process.
What do you think, Grae, about that?
I definitely get swayed. I try so hard to ignore everything in entertainment news as much as I can. But because unfortunately I know how much I love it. Like, I'm a gossiper. Like, I don't personally like. Kind of. I mean, I get so tickled when I hear like, ooh, this star is canoodling with this director. And then I'm like, girl, don't perpetuate that. Don't click on that link. That's rude. Don't do that. It definitely colors the way that I see the film. And so much of film criticism and art criticism in general is just subjective, that I want to drown out as much of it as I can so I could look at what's in front of me. The longer that I do this job, the more impossible it is. I can usually tell within the first 10 minutes of a movie, like, what's going on, what's going to happen, who the movie's for. And when I am surprised, it is a joy to behold. Mm-hmm. Just a magnificent experience that reminds me why I love this job.
Can you think of one off the top of your head that really surprised you
recently? Actually, I have one for sure. And it was like a big buildup for me emotionally, which was Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, so lucky for you, it will be available to purchase in April. I'm so excited. So I love Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo, and I think what they achieve with Bridesmaids is a really momentous event in cinema. And I mean, coming too late, of course, because it's like, women can be funny? What? You know, like that should have happened. That's not the first time that's happened. But so they were exceptional then, and then this movie is sort of their next thing together. And I was like, oh God, this is just teetering on the brink of going to be terrible. And I'm just so nervous. And first 10 minutes of the movie, I watched it on the couch in my house, and I could not stop giggling and was like, immediately it shifted from like, I had the answer to the question, does Grae like this? Because the answer was yes. And my next question immediately became, who let them make this? Because it is so weird and so fun and so consistent that I can't believe it got released. I was like,
Yeah. What about you, Caitlin? Can you think of a movie recently that really that you weren't expecting to like and then you ended up liking?
I wasn't say that it wasn't one that like when you mentioned ones that just like they take you by surprise and you know within the first couple of minutes whether or not you like them. Honestly, the first thing that popped into my head was the first Sundance screening of Assassination Nation in 2018.
wow.
I love that, like that first screening when no one knew anything about the movie. We had no idea what it was, and the whole first opening montage is a list of trigger warnings. And I lost my mind. I was so excited for that movie. I'm sitting here and I'm like, this needs to be in the Alamo Draft House. They need to do women only screenings, and there's like a mandatory 2 wine glass minimum before you can start the movie for everyone. I just that's the first that like in terms
Wow,
of
I haven't seen that one either.
the one that sticks out in my head is that one. That screening was absolutely wild because no one knew what to expect. That's the one that I
You know,
remember the
a
most.
couple of that just like pop into my head so fast.
Mm-hmm.
John Wick.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was like, holy mackerel. And similarly, nobody that is brand new, like it's like I kind of am over the genre of like average white men who are aging are all of a sudden badasses. But these actors are what invigorate them, and
Mhm.
Bob Odenkirk is just such a great choice. So anyway. What
Yeah.
about you, Rachel? Do you have one?
Yeah, Rachel.
Well, last year, I have to say, I think Love and Monsters really surprised me. I thought it was so fun and just everything that you could kind of want in a movie. It was funny, it was sweet, it was romantic, it had adventure, it had creatures that were really clever and well done. And I just overall really, really enjoyed it. So that was one that.
Wasn't that the same writer that did Dora the Explorer, the movie?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up.
I
But it
feel
wouldn't
like
surprise
it
me because I
might
liked
be.
that too.
Speaking of movies that were way better than you ever thought they would be.
Yeah.
Where I
Yeah.
was like, whoa. Again, like, who let them do this to a children's property? And yet it's still like appropriate, but it's so weird. Love.
I think another one that I'd heard enough positive buzz that I was pretty sure that I would like it, but I don't think I expected to love Parasite as much as I ended up loving it. And I mean, I don't think I knew what to expect. You know, I thought, was this going to be an art house kind of film or whatever? And I just thought it was great. I loved the characters. I loved the fact that it had something to say, but it was subtle about it and interesting about it, and you could have discussions about it, and the whole look and feel of it. And I thought, I mean, I saw it as many times as I could in the theater. I saw it when it was in black and white. I just absolutely adored it. And when it won Best Picture, I just was like, that can't be. The best film never actually wins.
Crazy, right?
I feel like with the Oscars, I'm always like, yeah, I feel like with the Oscars, I'm always like, oh, that's a good movie, but I'm never like super pumped about them. And so that was the first year that I was like, in a long time at least, that I was like, yes.
Such a special movie and such a special group of people that made it happen.
Yeah.
I did a Q&A with Bong Joon-ho and the entire cast.
Oh, wow.
And it was, so I was like so nervous because I wanted to do justice to this great film, and I wanted my questions, which are notoriously all over the map, to be easily translated. I wanted everyone to get the most that they could out of it. And what was incredible is, I mean, first of all, Sharon was Bong's translator and like went with him to every event. She's such a superstar. Her understanding of language and nuance and subtlety in numerous languages is exceptional. And so what would happen is I'd ask the question in English, everyone's understanding it and pondering it. Then Sharon has it make even more sense by sharing it in Korean. And then in this audience that was literally from all over the world, Bong or any of the actors would respond in Korean. The Korean speakers would laugh, and then Sharon would translate, and the English speakers and the Korean speakers would laugh. And like, it was like the most magical thing because it made me feel like film is universal. This is why we love it. This is why we do this, because it doesn't matter where you're from or what language you speak. Like, people everywhere understand similar concepts. I love it so much. It gets me so amped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was such an exciting awards run that they had. It was great. It was like the last good thing in 2020.
The only good thing.
I mean,
yeah.
For being honest,
but yeah, but Grae, I wanted to ask you. So you do a lot of interviews, or you have in your podcast and other things, and I do a lot of interviews for my podcast. And I was just curious, again, how do you not have that sort of affect your kind of view of the films after you've talked to them and you've gotten to know them? It's something that I feel like I'm pretty good at, but it's definitely something I have to, try to make sure that it's not too coloring my views.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always aware of what my own biases are, and I generally try to call myself out on them as clearly and openly as possible. Thankfully for me, these days, the majority of my work is through radio and television. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot easier for me to give context through my speech. So when I would be talking about Parasite, for instance, I would be talking about the film from my perspective as a filmmaker and critic, but at the same time would definitely mention that I have spoken directly with these people, and I think that they're just delightful. and so I try to make my bias as clear as I can at all times, because, if I'm not going to say it, I mean, I should be the one to say it. Let's put it that way. I don't want someone else to say it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and luckily most of the Hallmark movie, because that's mostly who I interview is Hallmark people, is, and most of them, I mean, we try to give critical analysis on Hallmarky's podcast, but it's not like the most serious analysis that you could give. I mean, it's Hallmark movies. Yeah. So I guess I just take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt.
I feel like with criticism, especially having worked for Rotten Tomatoes, like all people want to talk about is like, well, what's the tomato meter? And I think that is a very boring question. I think that really what is important as like someone receiving criticism, as like a fan that's reading a review, in my opinion, the gold of criticism is not just picking someone that has the same taste as you. It's picking someone to read or to listen to that whose perspective you appreciate. Mm-hmm. And that is ultimately the secret to how we become more well-rounded people. Not everyone is interested in having that conversation, as the internet has taught us many times. But that's what I do. It's like I don't want to read Leonard Maltin just because I agree with him all the time. I want to read his reviews because I think that he's a brilliant mind.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I wish that people understood, as far as Rotten Tomatoes goes, the struggle that are for like 80% of the movies I see. I'm kind of like, that was pretty good. It was okay. Yeah. Like, and trying to decide whether that Is it negative or positive? Is very hard sometimes. I have a lot of 2.5 star out of 5 reviews. What do I do with that? Where do I put it? And I think that for most critics, the difference between a 4 and a 6 out of 10, not that much. Yeah. Would you agree, Kaitlyn?
I would absolutely agree. As much as I see what Rotten Tomatoes is doing, and I absolutely think that it's important. But on another level, it's like, as critics, we were talking earlier about going into a movie and actually being surprised. And for general audiences, they don't get that. If you go back to the restaurant model, if somebody only eats at one restaurant a year and that restaurant is McDonald's, then McDonald's was the best restaurant they ate at that year. If somebody only sees one movie a year and that movie was, I don't know, Transformers, then Transformers was the best movie they saw that year. And that's where I feel like the audience and critical divide can happen sometimes, when we lose our minds over these weird indie movies and everyone's like, why are you freaking out? So, I mean, Rotten Tomatoes is a tough thing, because it is, you're like, okay, is this, how much is this going to sway? Is this a positive? Is this a negative? I know for me, like when I was doing the Snyder Cut, I was like, is this a positive? Is this a negative? I really don't know. And is it, yeah, it's tough. It really is.
Yeah.
And then you're like, how do I review the same film twice? I already did this.
The key was to have never seen it again since you saw it in 2017 and literally not remember a single frame. That was how I did it.
Well, I'm with you.
Yeah, well, and I said I was going to use this for my review. I'm proud of, actually, later on, but I didn't even feel like the Snyder Cut was an actual movie. I said in my review I felt like it was an event, like something you'd like Muppets 3D or something like that at the amusement park, but obviously 4 hours long. It's not really a movie. It's not a series either. So what do I do with it? Like, it was just sort of, I don't know what to do about this. I always try to ask myself the question of what was this movie made for? Who was it made for? What was the idea?
Yeah,
and is this successful in doing what it's trying to do? So when I watch a Hallmark Christmas movie, I'm not looking at it the same way as I am when I'm watching Nomadland or Minari or something like that. I'm watching, did it make a successful Christmas movie? For an hour and 20 minutes? Did they have good chemistry? Is it sweet? Is it a sweet romance? That's what I'm looking at. And I'm looking at different things when I watch Nomadland. And it's the same thing with the Snyder Cut. Like, I had to look at myself and say, is it successful in doing what it's trying to do? And in my opinion, the answer was yes. And other people, would have different opinions, but I would say I didn't love it. It wasn't like my favorite thing in the world, but it was fine. I thought it was okay.
Well,
so I gave it a positive.
I think that anyone that is consuming criticism is best serving themselves by taking it as, it is one way of seeing it, hopefully delivered to you by a person whose thoughts you're interested in hearing.
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes is designed to be very splashy and to make it give movies very distinct scores. It's not meant to be a cinema score that's like middle of the road. It's not designed like that. And I can't even count how many times that the stupid tomato meter was not what I believed. And just before I go is this movie Courtney Cox directed, and it was like 7 years ago or something. And I had never seen it. And I had it on HBO, and I looked on RT, and it was like, I looked it up so I could tell you. It's like 10%.
Mm-hmm.
The movie's good, you guys. It's good. I cannot believe that lowest score. And I'm like, ugh, the tomato meter strikes again.
Yep, it does.
Well, so one thing I like to ask on this show is, why do you think that female coverage and female criticism is important? Or do you think that a review is a review and it doesn't matter what the gender is of the person who's written the review? I don't know. What do you think, Kaitlyn?
I mean, absolutely, we need more representation across the board for film criticism, not just across genders, but across religious beliefs, sexual orientation, just like all aspects of it. I mean, it's not being, I'm not lying when I say it's like 70-30 male, I think male to female, I think, or something
Yeah.
like that on Rotten Tomatoes. So, like, going back to the dreaded tomato meter, it's like you're looking at it and it's like that's not even an accurate representation of what all film critics think of. It's only the film critics who are able to be on Rotten Tomatoes. So we different perspectives for everything is good because no two people have lived the same life and no two people are going to have the same criticism of a movie. But we absolutely need more representation across this industry and female criticism. We absolutely do, and it always makes me so happy. Like I was so thrilled when you joined the UFCA, Rachel, because now there's a whole 3 girls. There's 3 of us. Hooray! I was like,
well, and I was so excited for that because they had actually denied me the year before because I hadn't done a very good job in my application of showing my depth of criticism. I think they had the idea that I was just a Disney person and a Hallmark person, which I'm not. Like I've covered all the festivals. I have over 1,500 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. And so I think that they had the wrong idea. But then once they saw me going to all of the screenings that year in 2019, I think they were like, oh, yeah, okay. She doesn't just cover Disney. But I was pretty depressed when they denied me. So when I got in, I was like, yes.
But good for you for continuing to try, because the secret to all of this, the secret to being successful in any path and having your voice heard is just continually using it and just making sure, because eventually everyone that has something to say is going to find an audience. There's no question about it. But the telling part is that when times get really tough, and like, for instance, when you are super depressed, that you get rejected, you eventually picked yourself back up and you reapplied, and look at you now. Like that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, and I also want to tell people that having your content be a side hustle can be the best blessing of all. Is it can be something fun that adds this great dynamic to your life, and yet it doesn't consume your life. It doesn't take over your life. And so don't be depressed that you're maybe not as successful as you want to be. But it might be actually the kind of the perfect spot for you, is this sort of middle ground that can add this great little spice to your life, but not take over your life.
Oh yeah, I know all about the being consumed by your work thing. I have a terrible work-life balance.
Well, it's even gotten so much worse. Yeah, it's way worse for me since the pandemic, because all the stuff that was sort of my balance has all been taken away. So like my church and going swimming and other things that I used to do, gone. And so it's just work all the time. And once I start going back to church, once I get my vaccination, it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment because I've just been using Sundays all day for work. Oh my God, that's going to be weird. But it was just my coping mechanism to just dive into 100%, just working all the time.
Yep.
But luckily it's stuff I love to do. So that's the drug of it. But I still have my part-time job that I do, and I'm lucky that I'm able to do it, from home and able to make it all work with all of my work as a critic and as a podcaster. But I think that you can have so much fun on a channel before you have to deal with sponsorships and mean comments and just some of the stuff that comes when you're bigger. So it's not always. So enjoy the spot where you're at is what I wish I could tell people.
I think that there is a certain magic to doing something just because you love it, not because it's what gets clicks and not just because you're making money. And I look back fondly on those times in my life. And I think that it takes a lot of sort of like looking at yourself and looking at your work and reevaluating, just to make sure that you're following your passion still, because all of those things that you add into it when you become successful in the traditional sense, they change a person. So I am different now, and I interact professionally very differently now than I used to. And so I try to stay aware of that, and I try to remember that I'm doing this just because I was like at one point a sixth grader that just like bossed all my friends around and told them what movie to see every week. Like that was me. And I still am that person. And I just try to stay connected to that person.
I mean, when I started out doing this, I wasn't even getting paid at all. I was working for one of those sites where they'd had just enough ads on it to keep the lights on, so no one was making any money, which in terms of sites not paying you is about the best I think I could have hoped for. It wasn't like I was working for a site that someone was making a living off of, well, not paying me. I mean, there was a huge difference into when I started doing this full time and when I was just doing it for fun. But I do enjoy having this be my job. It's an incredible job. It really is. It's so much fun, and I have to say, in some ways, I was actually very grateful for 2020 because I don't live in LA, so getting invites to junkets was impossible. But with Zoom, I've actually had more opportunities this year than I have ever before, me and my TV section at Bleeding Coals. So I really hope that in terms of, again, branching out, giving more people a chance, I feel like now that we've normalized Zoom, we've normalized doing stuff over the internet, I'm hoping that more smaller sites and people outside of LA and New York will get the chance to, hone their skills in an interview, because it is a skill you need to learn how to do, interviewing talent. And I really hope that studios will keep virtual press days once things return to normal. I would really enjoy that.
I think they will.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Grae, because I know that covering Comic-Con is a big thing for you. And how do you think that all is going to evolve?
My best guess is this. Going forward, some people, studios, talent, handlers are really enthusiastic about going back to in-person stuff. However, Zoom stuff is so much more cost effective and is really leveling the playing field for movies that don't have big budgets. And it's giving people more access, like Kaitlyn, like you're talking about, which is super important these days and something that everyone is striving to achieve. So my vision of the future, as I see it happening slowly, is that there will be both, and that there's going to be so much opportunity for content that it will open things up for everyone who still has yet to be heard by a larger audience. So as we're focused on an award season that's very diverse and more critics from underrepresented places, that we're going to, there's plenty of room now. There's a swell, and I think that it's fantastic. I love it.
Yep,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah, I was thinking about it because I haven't been to Comic-Con, but I have been to D23 twice. And it's a great experience, but it's also completely exhausting. And there's definitely a side of me that if they were like, here, you can join the big hall virtually for like $50, I'm on.
Yeah,
I'm there.
Oh yeah, I've slept out for, let's see, I've slept out for Hall H, I've done Star Wars Celebration, and I've slept out for a D23 panel. And let me tell you, those experiences, you make friends that you will have for the rest of your life. There's no one like Line Buddy when it comes to overnight lines. But man, are they they're awful. Like they're a misery loves company situation. And I really hope going into whenever we have San Diego or D23 or any of those again, I really hope we get rid of the overnight lines. I hope we don't have to do that anymore. It's just, how did we ever normalize that?
It's tricky. I guess I didn't address a Comic-Con specifically. I don't have a good vision for those, because everyone is going to be operating simultaneously in the worlds of super pumped to get back, also very squirrely about being around other people. And I think it might be a couple years, even when the cons start operating again. I think that it will be a while before we see something comparable to all the overnight lines of the past. You know, it's gonna be really weird.
It is.
I don't know what it looks like.
I just said to my mom the other day, I'm like, I'm going to wear a mask at every convention for the rest of my life. I get every virus every single time I go to a convention. I come home sick, as you would not believe. I'm wearing a mask for the rest of my life at a con, unless I'm on camera.
At least you can work in a cosplay.
Yeah, working into cosplay.
You can be Raya. She has a mask.
I'm just gonna be Sub-Zero at Comic-Con for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's fine.
Well,
we're gonna make it work.
So what we like to do on this show is talk about an unpopular opinion that we've had and what that experience was like. And since I just barely finished South by Southwest, I definitely had some unpopular opinions. There was one called The In-Between Girl, which I wasn't a big fan of. And then there's a musical called The Best Summer Ever, which I totally admire. It's very inclusive casting with people of all different disabilities, and that's awesome, and I admire that. And it was definitely made with the best of intentions, with a very sweet cast, and so it's very difficult to say that I thought it was extremely amateurish.
Yeah,
I thought the music was there wasn't one memorable tune, and I was hyped for it because I love musicals, and I was hoping it would be something kind of like a sweeter version of Anna and the Apocalypse, which I loved, which was an indie kind of small budget musical. And that's what I was hoping for, but I just thought it was so bland, and there was just not a single sort of hummable song. And it's hard because you don't want to be mean to these people that are so sweet and so great, but I didn't enjoy it. So I have to be real and explain why. But it can be a challenging thing when you're at the festival and these darlings of the festival. Like memorably a few years ago, I did not like Brittany Runs a Marathon, which was the big movie of that. I just thought she was just such a jerk, and I did not care about her at all. and so that's an experience to kind of have the unpopular opinion in the festival. I think is something that every critic has. Most festivals, you have at least one that you're like, what? That's the big favorite. What about you, Grae? What did you think of an unpopular opinion?
I learned the hard way that when you put your thoughts into the public sphere, that the public is there to hear you. And so I was just filleting a movie called Chain Letter. And it is like a lesser known horror movie. It makes no sense. It's terrible. It's so easy to like. I consider myself more of an entertainer really than anything else. And so a lot of my criticism is couched in comedy. And so when I was making jokes about this completely ridiculous film, the phone rang, like the live line, which I answered as I don't have a call screener, and it was the screenwriter.
Wow.
It was terrifying. Like I needed clean pants. And so I had no choice but to stand my ground. I had said what I had said, and instead I turned it into an opportunity to talk to him about the screenwriting process as he saw it, and at what point of the screenplay was he most involved, and like, etc. And I was like, I think ultimately I was trying to deflect like what a dick I had just been, but I stood by what I had said. I didn't like just go back on it and be like, no, it was great. But I think, turning it again into like a human moment, calling yourself out, and then using it almost as a way to educate filmmakers that were listening. Like, what happens to your stuff when you put it out there? As it turns out, he had written an earlier draft, and the later draft got super changed. So he found my commentary a little bit funnier than the other screenwriter would have. But that it scared me bad enough that it taught me a super important lesson, which is that there are real people behind what you're criticizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had that a few times with the Hallmark films. Normally I try to, again, like you, couch it in humor, and people know that I'm a film critic, and so that, I believe in being honest, but you still try to. Usually I feel like we're lucky because there's usually somebody else on the podcast that likes the film, or we're able to balance it out somehow.
Yeah.
But just the other day I was interviewing a director, and she asked me point blank, "Did you like this movie that she did this
Boo,
Christmas?"
boo.
So mean. Who would
And
do that?
I said it was a mixed bag, which was true. I like mixed bag.
That's so diplomatic. Well done.
I said, and when then we moved on, and it was fine. But yeah,
Mixed bag.
I
That's
don't
so
really
good.
know what you're saying.
Oh my God, so funny.
Yeah.
But again, I commend your courage in saying that, because most people that interact directly with the filmmakers or the talent would have said, "I loved it." But you saying it was a mixed bag, you might as well have been like, it was a piece of dog crap.
Well, I know my audience enough, and they know me enough that if I were to have said that I loved it, when they know I didn't, and I said it on the podcast, then they would call me out on it, and I can't do that.
That's
So
good job. Like, really not easy to do that. Really nice work.
And I proceeded to focus on the mixed positive that I liked.
Oh my God, that always reminds me of this sketch in 30, like a part of 30 Rock, where Jenna is in terrible plays all the time and Liz goes and sees them. And every time she just finds something she can be nice about. And eventually it devolves into, wow, the paper that you made these programs on is so nice.
That's funny. It's like when Barney goes to Lily's plays, and I May Mother. He's like, I can't take it. But that's very true. What about you, Kaitlyn? What's an unpopular opinion that you've had recently, or that you want to talk about?
I'm trying to think. There's usually at least one in the awards season that'll get me. I always say is like, this is the movie that I don't like that's going to get me kicked out of the cool critics club. Like, I really didn't like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I really didn't like The Revenant. I hated Green Book. That was one of my. There's during the UFCA meetings, there's usually at least one time that Kaitlyn will get up on her soapbox, and boy, was I on my soapbox for Green Book. But one of the ones that, again, the first one that popped into my mind was incidentally a movie nobody talks about anymore. It was the Jennifer Lawrence movie Red Sparrow, and I really disliked that movie. And as soon as the embargo came down, the social media embargo, I immediately went out there and was like, so FYI, everyone, there's a lot of like sexual assault and like coercion and bad stuff going on here, and I was personally triggered by it. Here's what you need to know. This is it. And I just remember I got completely dragged on Twitter by Jennifer Lawrence stans who were so mad that I hated that movie. And that even that I didn't hate it, just that I went out of my way to point out that I just wasn't okay with all of the bad stuff going on in it. And yeah, that was memorable. I was like, that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, there's a whole bunch of people. I forgot Stan Twitter was a thing. Yeah. And I made it mad.
The individual actor stans can be the worst of all, because I don't know, they just have no. I feel like the franchise fans kind of are aware that there's bad entries and good entries in their franchise for the most part. But these individual, like the Emma Watson stans, oh gosh, when Beauty and the Beast was coming out, it was intense. I recently had it with Demi Lovato because I did not like her documentary. It was very weird the way they put it together. I thought at South by Southwest, and yeah, they
I
were not
remember
happy
seeing
with
you
me.
tweet about that.
Yeah, like I like her fine as a human. I just didn't think the documentary was very well put together. So yeah, that's an interesting experience. So then we like to talk about on the show sort of a project or a review or something we've done that we're proud of. And since I mentioned Justice League earlier, I will say one that I was very proud of last year was I wrote my review of Words on Bathroom Walls, which I don't know if either of you got to see, but I thought it was a hidden gem for the year. I really enjoyed it. And I think Charlie Plummer is such a great young actor. I think he's very good. And I really thought it's a movie about a kid that has schizophrenia. And so I wrote, when I was writing my review, I said, I know nothing about schizophrenia. So I would be curious if anybody's reading that knows something about it would offer their perspective and if they liked the movie. And because I have no idea if it's even accurate at all, or maybe it's insulting and I just don't know. And so I wrote this in. And then I had a young man contact me from my review who has schizophrenia. And I ended up actually having him on the podcast, and we talked it all out because he really loved the movie. And we got to hear his perspective. And because I think that the stigma around mental illness is such BS, and it makes me really mad. And so I felt so proud of having a chance for him to have an empowered moment and to talk about his life and in this movie. And the director, Tor Frudenthal, he heard it and he liked it so much. Then I interviewed him, and it was just such a positive, awesome experience. And the young man, he's now doing his own blog and he's talking about his life. And it was a really cool moment. And the fact that, somebody read my little blog and, kind of ripple effect on there made me really happy. So that's one thing I'm very proud of from last year.
Woo!
But
Nice.
what about you, Grae?
I have made the most of a really difficult year, and have finally, without limitations because of an employer, I've finally been able to start my own YouTube channel. It's not something that I've actually legally been able to do. And so I finally started it, and I can see so far what it's turning into is a really interesting resource for certainly film lovers, but definitely aspiring filmmakers, because I've been getting to do a lot of long form interviews with people making all kinds of movies. So I've done a lot of indies, some big releases, and I love diving in with people to talk about the stuff that rarely gets hit on because it's not necessarily the sexy stuff. I'm so interested in just the exchange around film, like how passionate we all are, that it's been cool to get support just for my stuff outside of the brands that I've been working with. And so I'm continuing it on Clubhouse too. So for anybody that is on Clubhouse, it's this really cool sort of live interactive podcasting app where you can join rooms and you hear people talk, and you can also join in, it's just super fun. Like, it's helping me remember exactly what I was talking about earlier. It's reintroducing me to the person that I was a long time ago that would have done anything to have this job, and it's so fun just to get to talk to new people. I love it.
I wish they have it on Android.
I know it's coming. It'll happen really soon. I absolutely guarantee.
Because I think that will be really fun. What about you, Kaitlyn? What's something that you're proud of that you participated in, that you worked on?
Just in the last year or overall? Because I've got two answers.
Just overall.
Okay, so overall, it was a similar situation to yours, actually, Rachel. I wrote a very, very negative review of Patriots Day, that Mark Wahlberg movie about the Boston bombers. And somebody from Boston who has family who was a police officer who was involved with that situation sent me a private DM on Facebook and told me how much he appreciated the fact that I completely called that movie out for making Mark Wahlberg a fictional person the center of the movie when there were actual real people there doing the work. And it was another one of those moments where I'm like, oh wow, somebody read my stuff. And like, he was like, I sent it to all of my friends. It's going like, there are people in the Boston Police Department who are reading it, and we really appreciate it. That the fact that you think we should have been the actual heroes when, we were. And that was really, really cool, was hearing that from somebody. And that was a lot of fun. Last year,
Yeah,
the thing that I wrote last year that I liked the most, I did a 2-part, like 2,000 plus word essay on virtual conventions and events that I really enjoyed working on and that I'm really proud of, that I just dove into all of it. Like what happened, what works, what didn't, where are we going from here? What does the future of conventions look like? I'm really proud of that because I put a lot into that. I worked on that for a long time, and yeah, I'm proud of that one.
That's great. Well, we'll have links for all of your content in the description, so make sure everybody checks it out. And thank you so much, both of you, for coming and doing this. This was so much fun for me, and I really am grateful for all the work that both of you do. And so, Grae, where can people find you and your content?
It's always my name, so it's GraeDrake, Grae Drake. So you can find me on YouTube and Instagram the most. Also on Twitter, Facebook, all those places. Columns are on Movie Phone. Interviews are all over the dang place. And also on Clubhouse now. So yay!
Yes. And Kaitlyn, what about you?
You can find all of my stuff over at Bleeding Cool. I write reviews and editorial and news and pretty much everything we can think of. I'm actually going to be doing weekly reviews for Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I'm excited about. And you can follow me on Twitter at Katie's Movies.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. And also make sure you're following the Hallmarkies podcast. Lots of good, fun stuff over there. And we also have our Patreon group and merch store, so check that out. We have the Female Film Critics Panel merch logo designs, which are really fun. So check that out. And thanks again so much. And we'll see you all next month. Bye, everyone.